right, my friends, welcome back to the Reisinger build. You can probably tell by the sights and sounds in the background that we have entered into the next phase. That's right, we are hanging our sheetrock today. This is a big day. We got stocked and we're hanging all on the same day. Now this episode, we're gonna get into all the ins and outs on how to get a really good drywall job. We happen to be using a really nice product. This is USG Sheetrock brand drywall. And we've got a couple of different products here. There's a lot to talk about in this video. We're gonna talk about some best practices, why we use particular products and thicknesses where. We're gonna get into sound abatement. I've even got a special guest for me to show me how to do some sound abatement between the bedrooms. With that being said, the Reisinger build in partnership with our friends at Builders FirstSource. This episode sponsored by USG. Let's get going.
A Build Original Series in partnership with Builders FirstSource. The Reisinger build.
All right, so guys, first off, we're using USG Sheetrock brand everywhere in the house. But you're also going to notice that this is a little atypical in that I've only got 5/8 going on this entire house. It's pretty typical that you see 1/2 inch on the walls and 5/8 on the ceilings, which in the old days we'd say, you know, we want that ceiling to be a little thicker and we don't want any possible sagging of the drywall. But for me, the difference on that 5/8 means that, number one, I've got more material, more mass in the house. But it also means that I've got a much straighter, smoother drywall. Now we're gonna be going to level 4 on this particular house. We'll get into that into a little bit here. But that 5/8 everywhere makes a big difference overall for me, both in noise for the house, but also in mass. There's actually quite a bit more mass of gypsum material in the house. I had a buddy help me calculate this, and he calculated that the extra mass of the sheetrock equated to about a 1/2 ton worth of BTUs being soaked up by this extra mass before it got into the house. So in the end, it helps kind of temperature regulate. Think about that old adobe house in the hot desert where those thick walls helped keep that heat from entering. That's a little bit what's happening with that 5/8. Now it's not quite to the same effect, but it definitely does make a difference. Once that mass gets the temperature, it wants to stay at temperature. Let's talk about products. You actually have 3 different products. You're gonna notice a green board here. You're gonna notice some of the board that's kind of the standard board is red. And then I've also got some of this. This is a little heavy, so lift with your legs. Check this out. This is called Structo-Crete. You've probably not seen this before. This is a relatively new product from USG. We're gonna get into all 3 of these and why we're using what in the different phases, but let's let the hang crew get rolling over here. It's about to get loud. We'll come back and check on their progress. Okay, y'all, we are in one of the upstairs kids' bedrooms. And so this wall here that's behind me is separating this kid's bedroom from the hallway behind us. Now there's an interesting framing detail that we did here that, believe it or not, comes back to this episode as we're talking about sheetrock here. This is a staggered stud construction wall. The BFS people, when they printed that bottom plate, you'll see the inkjet printing on that bottom here shows the studs, and it shows an up and down location. This is kind of genius. This is part of the Ready Frame package. But you're gonna see at the bottom is a 2x6 plate, but all these actual 2x4s right here are either to the inside or the outside of the wall. And that allows us to do a kind of an interesting insulation strategy. If you saw our Owens Corning insulation goes into this bat right here, but then there's a stud back there, and then the same is happening behind us. So it's kind of cool. We've got this cavity that the studs are not connected. So if I bang on this stud right here, it wouldn't vibrate the sheetrock on the other side because only the sheetrock is gonna be applied to the face. Now, we're gonna show you a cheap trick to get some extra duty soundproofing on this wall separating this room from the staircase right behind me. But before we go there, I wanna show you one other cool trick. that we talked about in a previous episode. This red pad right here is an acoustic putty pad. This guy. What it's doing is it's making sure that if I were to shine my flashlight into this outlet, that you wouldn't see any light go through there. What we're trying to do is stop airflow through that outlet. Anywhere that air can go, sound can go also. So we want to stop any air transmission from this room to the room next door, and that's going to help. This is used in the commercial world for fireproofing. It's a fire stop putty pad. You can get them on Amazon, you can get them at your local drywall supply house. They run maybe $2 to $5 each, something like that. So this is pretty inexpensive. And this wall in particular is a good wall to do this on, because look, I've got only a smoke detector up there and an outlet here, and that's it. There's no other penetrations in the wall. The other thing I want you to notice about this wall is see how I've got an intersection here? This allows me to have extra depth, and no one's gonna be able to tell that this wall is extra thick. And then over here, I've got a doorway, and I've got plenty of room for trim. I've got 3 studs between that doorway, and this trim is relatively small. It's about a 3-inch trim. So I'm good to go to add some extra thickness to the wall. Now here's what we're doing. We've got some standard Fire Code Type X USG brand sheetrock right here. So this is what I like to use all the time. We talked about that earlier in the video, that the whole house is getting 5/8 compared to 1/2 inch. And we're gonna lay the first layer of drywall on here in kind of a normal fashion, nothing special. But here's where things are gonna get a little interesting. We're gonna show you double drywall construction. There's a couple ways to do it. We could just lay 2 layers up straight and then finish it as normal. That could work. But I've got another detail that will take this a little bit higher on its STC value. And that's using this right here. This is USG sheetrock brand acoustic sealant. Now, acoustic sealant is a special type of caulking that never cures. It basically stays viscous and elastic for the life of the product. Unlike, let's say, latex caulking that hardens, or some other type of caulking that gets kind of brittle and hard over time, this one's always gonna remain soft and pliable. And so the places we're gonna use this, let's talk about this real quick. We're gonna use this on the perimeter at a minimum, where the sheetrock lands to framing. We wanna make sure that that perimeter is air sealed. We're also gonna use this where the sheetrock lands to this outlet here to make sure that we don't have any airflow between the sheetrock and the outlet. And then I've got one other way to use this, and this is pretty inexpensive as a building material. So I'm gonna show you one other tip. When we get there, we'll pick it back up. So let's get going on hanging some of this sheetrock. All right, guys, look who made it all the way from Montana.
Hi, everybody.
Lydia, thank you so much for coming out to the job site.
Yes, thank you.
So if you guys don't know Lydia, Drywall Shorty is her nickname. She's been shooting videos on the Build Show Network for a long time. You've been doing drywall as a trade for 20 years now?
Yeah, a little over 20 years.
A long time. We actually did a great video series called Talking Trades. You should check that out. But Lydia, I wanted to get your expert advice. We're starting in this room. This is a kid's bedroom. We're doing some soundproofing. What do you think about double drywall?
I think it's a great idea. It's going to add extra mass. I'm assuming you're doing 2 layers of 5/8 here.
That's right.
Yeah, that's going to add a ton of sound protection.
And it's kind of a cheap trick, right? This is not an expensive a detail, right? We didn't go to some super expensive soundboard. Like, we didn't go to RC Channel.
Yeah.
Not that that's weird, but this is really an easy detail. Nathan's got the first layer up for us already. Why don't you give us a little advice on acoustic sealant and how to take the second layer to the next detail?
Yeah, definitely. So we have our first boards up here, and I saw you marked everything out. We have our studs marked, which will be nice because then we can find them later. Yep. And we're not just kind of guessing where we're going. And then with the acoustical sealant, we're going to do around our electrical boxes, our perimeter.
I like it. Why don't you give us a little professional caulking job on this one, can you?
Maybe. We'll see.
Okay, Lydia, I've got you on site. It's very rare that I get you on my job site. I want to look at the house through your eyes and give these guys some perspective. I think it's really smart as a builder, as a GC, to walk with any trade prior to them starting work. And I want to get your perspective on, okay, we're just about to start hanging drywall on this job. My USG sheetrock brand has not been delivered yet, so we get full access to the whole house. Let's look at some things from your perspective, and especially as I think about hanging for a really good finish. So why don't we start, is there anything in this kind of foyer, we're right off the front door here, anything here that you notice that that could be an issue for me?
Looks like you have, are these cavity sliders?
These are not cavity slider, different brand. These are a pocket door that is a metal frame.
Yes.
And then it had my guys infill with wood.
Okay.
What are you thinking about this door?
I'm thinking it's great, but I mean, you have it installed. That would be something I would probably talk to you about. Like, what does this look like when it's finished?
Right.
How do you want me to hang this?
Great point.
There's metal in there. You usually have to use 1/4-inch screws or smaller screws when you're hanging pocket doors, because the cavity here, like, how do you want me to do this?
Yeah. So these are a Cleese brand.
Okay.
It's a big metal kit, and I thought, it'd be really nice to have solid backing, so we didn't have to use a screw that would go into the metal. We could actually screw into the wood if we wanted to. So this is just some 1/2-inch zip that we had on the job site. But you're right, screw length on pocket doors,
super important.
Really big deal. Otherwise, you're gonna scratch that door later if you don't think about it and put that 1-inch screw in, let's say.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. So that's something I'm looking at, is what's going on with this.
Yeah.
What do we want it to look like when it's finished?
Yep.
What's your trim kit look like? All of those things for that area.
I wanted to get your take on these hangers. We've got an LVL beam here, and we're hanging these floor joists off that. These look pretty dang flush to me, but I didn't do anything carpentry-wise to try and make that totally flush. What do you think about that? You think we're going to be okay there, or do you think that we have to pay some special attention?
Those look okay. We can definitely have some bulging, especially if you have some big brackets and you don't make them flush.
Yeah.
What happens is you put the sheetrock over it and it will actually break it and bust it.
Right.
So that's very common. Like, they'll go to put the rock up and then it's just pushing and it's bulging, and then you'll just wind up with a big blistered spot.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. These are kind of a standard hanger, standard gauge. I don't know what that is, 20 gauge, let's say. But when you get to the real thick gauges, below 20 gauge, I have one to show you. I bet you're going to notice it. They can get thick enough that can really mess with your drywall, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's transition to the laundry room space over here, because I suspect that these utilities in this room might give you a little bit of heartburn.
Yeah.
For instance, that stud plate right there is a big boy, isn't it?
That is, and that's an area where you're going to have to be smart with it. Like, are you going to float it out right there? What'll probably wind up happening is you put the sheet up, a screw there, screw at the bottom, and then it's just going to float over that plate.
Right.
And then try and keep it so it's not bulging and then not breaking the drywall board too.
Yeah, and these are thick plates. I'm not quite sure why my plumber needed it so thick. I don't know if that was my inspector, but those are beasts. I mean, you could absolutely not put a screw in that one.
Yeah,
No one's going to accidentally put a screw in that pipe.
No.
But then I've also got my recessed dryer vent, which is really nice, from Innovate Products. And then I've got my washer box. These are areas to be cautious about as we think about drywall.
Yeah, 100%.
And in fact, even this plastic is pretty dang thick. I think we're going to be okay.
And even maybe
but
like the screws too. I mean, that would be something I would look at.
That's a really
and
good
then
point. Yeah, your
the
screws
electrical
might be sticking
boxes.
out.
A big thing that happens is this spot right here. If these boxes aren't even, which they look like they are,
yeah, good
but
point.
if one is further out than the other, it makes the drywall board bulge.
Great
and it'll
point.
break it.
Yeah.
So you'll go to hang around that, and then you'll have broken rock, and it'll just be a disaster.
It's going to be really hard there.
Yeah, it's not super fun. And then you have your pipe there too, and then...
And a clean out down there. Yeah. Did you notice what I did with my mechanical closet here? This is my water heater closet. And we did something a little special in here that I've started to do. I did this detail in my house, and I've started doing this now in more projects. Lydia, this is 3/4-inch Advantech, the same stuff that's on our feet here, that my guys installed and painted gray prior to the plumber starting. So the plumber would have to drill through. Now, we could have put sheetrock up in there.
Yeah.
And then the plumber could have drilled through that. But man, what a hassle to do these tiny little closets and do the mudding and taping and make them look good and then painted. So I thought, I'm going to start doing this from now on. What do you think about this?
I love it. I love it. If you're building and you're thinking about this, I can't even tell you how happy that would make me to walk in and be like, yes, I don't have to do anything with the mechanical closet because they eat up time. I mean, and if everything's installed before we get in there, then you're having to make tiny cuts.
Oh, that's the worst.
That's horrible. And then it just doesn't look good. And we have a hard time making it look good. So I love that.
Taking this out of the hands of the drywall contractor, I think, is really smart.
Yes, super
Let's
nice.
keep going into the kitchen, Lydia. All this blocking is from my cabinet guy, but I was impressed. Nathan did a real nice job keeping these nice and flush.
Yeah, that looks
None
really
of this
nice.
is going to be pooching any drywall. Pooching is a technical term, by the way, I believe.
Very, very
Probably
technical.
shows my my accent right there. I think we're in pretty good shape in here. I'm just realizing that we got a board we forgot to take down. I'll have to take that thing down. And when it comes to the rest of the house, the thing I'm looking for, Lydia, is hardware that might be in the way.
Yep.
That's a strap that's connecting my top plate to that LVL header. And that one looks pretty thin. I think we're going to be okay on that guy. But these over here look like they might be a problem for you.
Yeah, definitely. And we run into this pretty frequently. There's a couple options here. I mean, what we sometimes do and what the hangers will do is they will just route that out, especially if it's really bulged. Like sometimes commercial buildings have the huge brackets with all of the steel in them.
Smart.
So sometimes you just route them out and then you mud them flush. With that one, it looks okay. It's probably going to create a little bit of a bulge though, and especially with an angle like that, what'll happen is you'll be looking down this wall and it's going to go whoop and just have like a big thing in there. So if it was me, I would router that out, and then that way I can make it straight and flush.
Yeah, smart. The other thing to think about is anytime you have raking light against the wall, let's say a high window, a skylight, anything that wall is going to be washed with light, that's the wall you got to really pay attention to. I've made that error. We're not thinking about it and having to come back and fix.
Yeah.
This house, 9-foot ceilings. There's not a lot of that raking light issue here, except for maybe my skylight. We'll show you that in a second.
Yeah, not
But I
loving
think we're
that.
in pretty good shape.
No, I think this is pretty good. I mean,
Here's something you may not have seen before I wanted to show you.
This wall I would probably be concerned about.
How so? What did I do
You
wrong
had
over
that
there?
window right there.
Oh,
you can
great
tell already
point.
it's
Yes,
already
that
raking.
is the raking light. Yes, that's
So that
exactly
wall.
right. It's raking across that wall, and you can see all the dimples in the insulation and studs. That wall, I should probably double check, is perfectly straight with a 8-foot straight edge.
Yeah.
So that when my drywall guy gets here, it's set up well for him. Great point.
Yeah, that wall for sure.
I want to show you something you may not have seen before that I just thought of on this house. I put a little Post-it note extreme on here, but this is a block out for an OD access panel.
Okay.
And so I've got a hose bib right there on the other side. There's an Aqua hose bib outside. So I had Nathan cut me just a sheet of leftover OSB that's the exact size of my access panel.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And so I'm going to have the sheetrock guys just drop their rock to the sides on this, finish all around it, and then I'll unscrew that and I'll have the perfect cutout for my access panel.
No, that's a great way to do it. I mean, that's something that will get buried too. People will just rock right over it. So it's super smart to have something there and then have them just finish to it because it happens.
Yeah.
They will rock over electrical outlets, access panels.
For sure.
Can lights, everything. So putting that there and giving them a heads up, at least they know what to do with it, and it saves you headache later.
That's a great point. Let's talk about marking real quick, because
Yes.
some builders like to do it themselves. Sometimes people don't want it marked because it messes with their, their beautiful subfloor. What do you think about marking, let's say, can lights or outlets on the floor? Do you like to do it? Do you like the builders to do it? What's your preference?
Probably the builder to do it, honestly. I'm not going to come in and start marking on your subfloor.
Yeah.
At least not without communicating with you. I'm not going to want to, like, you come in and you're like, why is there red marker everywhere or something?
Sure.
But I think it's a great idea. Number one, you can find it later. So if you know, like, oh man, there's definitely something missing in this room.
I feel like there should
and
be
there's
4
a
lights in
can.
here, not 3.
Yeah, but you can easily find it. It makes sure that the hangers know what they're doing. I mean, we've been in jobs where they have completely, sheetrocked over HVAC vents. And nobody caught it. So I think it's really smart.
Yeah.
Like, put yourself in a place where you can have success.
Yeah, really smart.
Yeah.
Let's walk this way. I got something that I think you're both going to like, and you're going to think that I might have some problems on my hands. And it is directly above our heads right here, Lydia. Check out that bad boy. Isn't that cool?
It's cool, but I already am not liking you for doing that. Seriously, if I'm coming in here, I'm like,
So what about the skylight are you concerned about?
Well, it's really, really high.
Yeah.
And like looking at this space right here, it's narrow.
Yeah, it's
so
tight.
typically you would put like a big blue scaffolding. Those ones are safer to go really high with.
Yep.
So what you're going to have to do is do either a skinny set and have lots of bracing going on.
Oh, yeah.
Or just,
Great point.
I would build a platform from the first floor right there, platform, and then you can do your scaffolding on top of your platform to get up there. But that's not going to be very fun.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. You know, we, in the design phase, we're like, oh, it'd be awesome to have a big skylight up there.
Yeah.
And yet, when you walk in, you immediately go, that's probably a whole day's work for maybe a 2 or 3 man crew to build the scaffolding, to work on top of that scaffolding and hang all that sheetrock around that. Now the finisher's got to get up on that same rickety scaffolding over the course of, 4 or 5 days to get my level 5 up there.
Oh yeah.
That's not going to be fun, and you're going to pay for it in your bid from your drywall contractor too.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think too, if you're pushing us to get done and you have something, a feature like that, and we have to build scaffolding, we're going to have to work down the walls.
Yep.
So we can't get everything done. Like you're going to have to build it, break it down, and then continue, and then work down your next layer, and then continue and work down your next layer. Yeah. So don't push with stuff like that. I think that's really important. Is people think it's just like, you can just come in here and just get it done like that, and it's like that is not a get done fast thing.
I do want to point out though that the giant hangers that I've got on there, I tried to pad out my framing so that those hangers on that double hanger from that truss, if you can see it, where that truss hangs on the double truss, that hanger's real thick, and it's got those nails that stick out too. We tried to pad that out so that it wouldn't pooch the drywall, but it's still going to take some work from that drywall contractor.
Yeah, and that's definitely with that. I would probably, I mean, you can also route the back of the drywall or kind of shim out so it would be flat, but personally, I would just rather have them just kind of cut it out, just like that other spot over there. Yeah. I mean, you can hang over it, but a lot of times it's going to break the sheetrock or it's going to break the board, and then you're having to fix it anyway and cut it out, because I can't even tell you how many times I've walked in and there's like this big bulge and you're like, what is going on? You cut it back, there's one of those hangers there, and it's like, it just would have been better to just not have it in the first place. Right. Because we got to cut it out anyway.
Great point. So helpful to walk with you, Lydia. I really appreciate it. Let's end with this. I want to get your take on the age-old question. You've probably talked about this 5 million times, but it's worth repeating. Do we hang this house with 5/8 or do we hang it with 1/2 inch?
I would do 5/8. I mean, you've already invested a lot in the flooring, your framing. It's a super quiet house, and that 5/8 is going to take it that much farther.
Yeah, it's that much thicker.
Yes.
The other thing that I like about 5/8 is it adds mass to the house.
Yeah.
And in a climate like mine, where I'm worried about that heat coming through the walls, once that drywall gets cold, it wants to retain that cold because it's got that more mass to it. So you're adding mass to your house by going to that 5/8. It's quieter. It stays more stable from a temperature perspective. And as we were talking about that raking light, it's really going to span those slight imperfections of my framing better. So I'm a big fan of going 5/8 everywhere. I know that the hangers don't necessarily love me for that, but.
Just looking at your ceilings too, we've got big, wide expanses here. And if you're doing half, you're going to see that wave, you're going to see all the dips. Yep. 5/8 is going to give you a better looking product too in the end.
Yeah, for sure.
Better finish.
And I'm a huge level 5 fan.
Yeah.
So we're doing level 5 here. That's really my signature. My drywall contractor calls it the Reisinger 5 because he knows that's what we always do in our jobs, and we really like that really smooth finish. So going that 5/8, going to that smooth wall, I think it's a great way to go.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it'll look really good. And the 5/8 is going to help too with that smooth finish.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, if you don't know Lydia, she's a drywall contractor. She works with her husband and a bunch of other tradesmen and women around Bozeman, Montana. But she's shooting videos on a weekly basis on our Build Show Network. You should go check out her library. She's got probably at this point several hundred videos on the buildshow.com.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I was looking at them the other day and I was like, whoa, there's a lot of footage.
She's also shooting videos on her job site on a literally daily basis. She's at Drywall Shorty, which I think is funny because when she goes to trade shows, people don't know her name's Lydia oftentimes. They're like, oh my gosh, that's Drywall Shorty. I think that's hilarious. So you've got a nickname that hides your real name sometimes.
I don't mind it. I like it. That's how most people know me.
That's Drywall Shorty.
Recognized at the gas station the other day, and it's like, oh, hey, Drywall Shorty. And I was like, hey, that's me. Cool, nice to meet you. And then go on my way.
That's awesome. I get the Build Show guy is what they say to me sometimes when they don't know my name. Hey, it's the Build Show guy.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Which is funny.
No, I like it.
Lydia, I really appreciate you coming. We've got a ton of work to do on this house, but I appreciate you coming in this pre-stage here.
Absolutely.
And I think that bedroom that we spent all that time soundproofing on is going to make a huge difference for the kiddo that lives there. Maybe there's a baby sleeping in that room someday. We took that extra time to really get it nice and quiet. That's some great advice you gave us. I appreciate it.
Yes, no problem. Happy to be here.
Hey, Lydia, let me do that top section.
Sounds good.
You can call me Drywall Tolly instead of Shorty.
Well, I don't know if I'd be able to reach off that ladder. So
Slightly
you
taller.
Than me, yeah.
So have you used a lot of this acoustic sealant before? Are you familiar with this product?
I'm really not, Matt. I mean, we were just talking too. You are really applying a lot of it.
Yeah, you know, this is a product that you want to be liberal with. And so since we're doing 2 layers here, I'm doing the perimeter now. You already did the outlets. Those look good. And so we're going to go a little heavy because I've got another layer of 5/8 coming in here, and we want to really get a nice, anything that's a gap we want to fill, and then we want to have a nice bead in there so that when the next layer comes on, it will kind of squeeze in.
Which is super interesting. I had no idea because I was like, well, that's a lot because I'm used to like kind of finish paint caulking where less is more, but
no, this is the opposite. More is more.
Okay.
So you want to be real liberal with this, you know, get a case of it, use it, be generous. You can see that I've got a little bit of a gap between the sheet and the ceiling framing. So I'm going heavy here. We've used 1 tube here and we've only gone, you know, let's say half the ceiling.
Yeah, and when we only had 2
3/4.
outlets too. I mean,
so that's why we got at least 8 tubes of this. So this is good stuff. We want to be liberal with it. And for the price point, this is an inexpensive way to get some great soundproofing. Lydia, before we let you go back to Montana, I did want to show you one other cool thing, detail-wise, that we're doing from USG. Let's actually walk over this way into this bathroom, which is right off of this kid's bedroom. And this is a detail that I'm curious whether you've done much before. We hung our USG Durac brand cement board in here prior to the hang crew.
Yes.
And I had my tile contractor do this so that when we come back with our sheetrock, we can actually mate to the cement board. And my tile contractor did it because he knew exactly where that line's going to be from tile ending to sheetrock starting.
Yes.
Any comments or tips that you want to mention on this?
Yeah, I actually prefer it this way. If we walk in and there's nothing there, we have no idea where to end, where to start. And then what winds up happening is they wind up either coming short and then we have to come back and butt up to tile after it's caulked, everything's done, which is the worst. Or, you know, they're cutting out big chunks of our drywall and then we're having to come back in and patch.
Yeah,
so I personally like it this way much better.
Yeah. And there's no issues with you putting a finish coat of mud on this cement board too, right? Because it'll look like the rest of the level 5 on the house. The tile contractor, let's say if he stops an inch or 2 from this edge right here, will look like finished drywall. No one will know that behind that is actually cement board. And
well, and especially with this corner right here, you're going to get a much nicer look. Because if he didn't do this and we're just coming straight up, I mean, sometimes we'll let it float there. So if this wasn't there, we go ahead and do the corner bead and then kind of not tack it on this side so that they could put their board behind there.
Great point.
But it doesn't look as good. It's really, this is going to look much better. We can go ahead and finish around this, pull the corner bead around. I would probably even do metal or vinyl in here. Probably a vinyl product actually because of the moisture in here.
For the humidity.
Yep. So, and then you could just get that done and then he has a nice corner to come up to.
So when the sheetrock crew comes and they hang my USG sheetrock brand 5/8 on here, it'll mate in flush with this. The tile contractor's already gone. I can't thank you enough for coming to visit me, Lydia,
yes.
and seeing part of the process, getting it from your eyes. It's super helpful, I think, for us to have walked through the house ahead of time. And these same details that we talked about on this kid's bedroom, we're going to do in the opposite kid's bedroom, and we're going to do something slightly different in the master. So stay tuned for something else from USG as another option for soundproofing. But thanks for coming, my friend.
Yes, thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see y'all later. All right, my sheetrock panels are installed. Guys, I've got a special guest on site, Kyle with USG with me.
Good to be here, Matt.
Kyle, I want to pick your brain since you are the product manager on the different products we used here. I've got 3 very distinct panels on this house. And starting here in the laundry room is a good place to talk about them because there's a real distinct difference. You'll notice, guys, that where my washer and dryer is, I've got a green panel, and then from there up, basically from 4 foot up, I switched to a white panel. Talk to me about what we got here, Kyle.
Well, I like seeing the fact that we've got the 5/8 thick panels throughout the house.
Yep.
Particularly here, the green panel that we're talking about on the bottom there, it's our sheetrock mold tough fire codex. So it's a mold and moisture resistant product. The core is comprised of a moisture resistant core, has additives that help resist that moisture absorption that can occur with some standard panels. And then it's wrapped in a paper facer that's both mold and moisture resistant. It's used in areas like our room here, kitchens, bathrooms, where we might have higher levels of humidity or incidental moisture exposure. So it helps
It's not made to put tile right on top of this, obviously, right? This is
not in wet areas, correct.
This is incidental moisture and incidental humidity.
Exactly right.
Which is why in this area, we switched from that to my standard sheetrock 5/8 Type X, is that right?
You got that right.
Okay, so tell me what that Type X means. You know, I've heard that for years as a contractor. Not everybody watching knows what that means.
So the Type X is an industry definition. It's an industry term that's used to identify products that have been evaluated to provide a certain level of fire resistive performance. Mm-hmm. So the Type X designation is actually one that's applied to the panel, but where the panel's been used to achieve a certain fire resistance performance on a system or within a system. In this case here, the Type X designation identifies that the product has been evaluated and approved for use in fire resistive applications, the fact that it has higher levels of fire resistant performance.
Now we're going above and beyond. There's not a code here I'm trying to meet with this product being 5/8 Type X.
Correct. Yeah.
But what I like about it, I said this earlier in the episode, Kyle, it's got a little bit more mass. It helps me when I might have some imperfections in framing. That's a little stiffer. It helps kind of smooth out those small imperfections. And I just feel like I get a quieter house when I use all 5/8 compared to a lot of builders and a lot of production houses that have just 5/8 on the ceiling and maybe 1/2 inch on the rest of the walls.
So for sure, we talked about the fire resistant performance, which is enhanced with the 5/8 panel compared to a 1/2 inch. Definitely it also helps with the sound performance as well. That 5/8 inch panel, thicker, more dense, helps with that sound abatement from room to room within the residential. And then certainly also it's a bit more durable than the normal 1/2 inch panel. So in areas where we might see some incidental impact, you know, it's more resistant to denting, scratches, indentations than a normal 1/2 inch panel.
I've got 4 kids and a dog in my house, so I'm very familiar with incidental damage.
It helps you there.
Now, as we walk into this kitchen and family room space, Kyle, this house, like a lot of houses these days, a lot of big open spaces. Actually, this is kind of a good spot to see that I used also in the kitchen here. My kitchen sink's going right here. You can see my plumbing going through. We also used the green mold resistant there and then switched from there up above with standard Type X. That wasn't necessarily a cost thing, to be honest. This is a really well-priced product. It's not a lot more expensive than this. It's pretty affordable.
Exactly right. Not a big increase in price at all. We're talking maybe a couple cents a square foot.
Yeah, it's not a whole lot.
Increase from 1/2 inch to 5/8, and then going from the standard 5/8 to the mold and moisture resistant.
I always tell people that typically, if I were to press my drywall contractor on his bid, how much more to go all 5/8 in the house compared to half, you know, depending on the size of the house is going to vary, right? But on this house, which is around 3,000-ish square feet, it's a few $100, right? It's not a ton of money. And there are some lighter weight 5/8, by the way. We're maybe getting into the weeds here a little bit. But if I remember correctly, this EcoSmart panel is a little lighter weight than the standard 5/8 Type X. Something like 20% lighter?
About
Does that sound
20%
right?
lighter, yeah. A little less than a 1/2 pound lighter per square foot. So when we're talking about panels that are 4 feet by 8, 4 feet by 10 or 12, you know, we're talking about several pounds per panel. That the EcoSmart Fire Codex is lighter than the standard Type X.
Yeah.
So it adds up.
And I do want to point out, by the way, that this product can be used on ceilings as well as walls. I think there's a misconception in the industry, and I actually heard you say this before we started on camera, that you've heard some contractors say, oh, I can't use that on the ceilings, it's not approved for that. That's not true, right?
Yeah. Back in the day when moisture-resistant board first came out, there were some limitations on its application. Those have long gone, where the products absolutely, these 5/8 mold and moisture-resistant product, the Mold Tough here is absolutely acceptable for use in lids. So as we've seen some of the bathrooms throughout here that we've used it, yeah.
Now let's talk sound. You know, we don't like to use the word soundproofing or a soundproof house. In fact, you actually wouldn't like it if there was zero noise whatsoever. It would feel weird, like sound studios do. But we do like to knock down that noise in houses. And I think it'd be interesting to give these guys some reference to what we might do. And also, I actually brought my sound meter. Maybe we'll turn that on and talk a little bit about what the decibels look like. So let's give these guys a little bit of advice. When you guys think as a company about sound abatement and reducing noise in the house, give me some strategies that you think about.
So the thing that we look at relative to sound performance is controlling sound transmission through spaces. So the partition, the wall separating one area from the next, the floor ceiling assembly separating the bedroom above from the space below.
Yeah, so in other words, if I'm in the kitchen here and that TV's over there, I'm going to hear that TV no problem. There's nothing.
There's no wall there, sound's going to come through.
But on the other hand, this bedroom, which is above me here, I may want to take some steps to abate that noise and knock it down a little bit between this kitchen space and, let's say, this kid's bedroom above us, or the primary bedroom, which is on the other side of that wall.
Exactly right. Adjacent bedrooms, you know, bedroom next to a living space or a bathroom next to a living space. We'll look at how do we abate that? How do we control that sound? So an excellent, first option is material selection.
Yep.
So the use of 5/8 inch thick panels versus the 1/2 inch. Both the material thickness as well as its density and weight helps to reduce some of that sound transmission through the partition.
And as I look at your literature and a lot of manufacturers' literature, I see this thing called STC, and it's basically a measurement of how much sound a assembly will reduce from one side of the assembly to the next. Did I say that roughly?
That's right,
In
yeah.
contractor speak?
That STC is the sound transmission through the partition. So it's a measurement of approximately how many decibel reduction is created through that partition.
So when I think of STC, higher is better.
Higher is
right?
better.
A higher STC means it's going to knock down more of that sound. Let's think about a standard wall in this house. For instance, the partition wall between my front study, which is kind of a bedroom, and the master closet is just a 2x4 framed wall with insulation in the wall and 2 layers of 5/8 on both sides. What's the rough STC on that wall?
So with 2 layers of 5/8 on both faces, as well as the insulation in the cavity, we'll see about a performance of STC 40 there.
Okay, so that's pretty good. That's
It is.
better than, let's say, just a 2x4 wall with 1/2 inch and no insulation,
There
which
we're
might be something like 31, 32.
Yeah, right around that 30 performance, exactly right.
And every time we get a little bit higher on that STC, we're knocking down some of that sound transmission between the walls. Now, we did go to some higher levels of sound abatement. In fact, I had Drywall Shorty here a little bit ago, and she helped me in this upstairs bedroom, for instance, which has staggered stud construction and insulation, and we went to 2 layers of 5/8 on one wall. What would that type of, I think you actually have a drawing on that, don't you, right here?
Yeah, so in that case, we're getting upwards of STC 50. So as a reference point, the STC values are on a logarithmic scale, meaning for every 10 points, that reduction is doubled. The perception, the noise is doubled.
Quite a bit.
So for every 10 points, we're seeing that sound performance cut in half then. So going from STC 30 to STC 40, that's cutting that noise in half. And then going from STC 40 to STC 50 with that wall that you've identified is cutting that perceived noise, that apparent noise, down in half yet again.
And we talked about it earlier in the episode, but that's giving us mass on that wall. That's giving us some type of decoupling, meaning the front wall and the back wall aren't touching each other, which is going to reduce the vibration effect coming through that wall. And we've also made sure that that wall is airtight, right? That we don't have air going through, because anywhere air can transmit between rooms, we're gonna have that sound transmit through there as well.
Exactly right. Good design practice, use of gypsum panels, it's excellent, but if we have openings through there, if air can get through, sound's gonna get through, and it's gonna adversely affect the performance of that assembly.
Yeah, for sure. And what I like about what we've done so far in all these assemblies is there's nothing special, right? It was just standard lumber that I got at my builder's FirstSource. About the only thing special we use maybe is some of your acoustic sealant that I bought from the drywall supply house, but 2 layers of 5/8, no big deal, right? Just thoughtfully applied. Now, I brought my cheap little sound meter. This is like a $50 meter off Amazon. And as we're talking, it's showing that our decibel level of our speech is something like, 68, 70, something like that. So if I had an STC wall of 50, my limited understanding of this would be that maybe on the other side of that wall, if I'm talking, if there's noise that's 70 decibels here, we might knock that noise down by 50 decibels. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. So the apparent or the perceived on the other side would be around 20 decibels.
That's pretty good. Now we're talking, and I've also got some guys starting on the taping behind me, so we're probably not going to get down below that number to show it, but this meter actually cuts out at 40 decibels. So it actually it's not sensitive enough to show me a number below 40 decibels. That's not to say that you can't hear below 40 decibels, but I think what we're talking about here is thinking about, for instance, I always tell when I'm talking to my contractor buddies about sound and sound abatement, I always say, well, what's the intended use of that room? If it's just you and your wife or your spouse at home, maybe it's not a big deal. On the other hand, if your wife's pregnant and that's gonna be the baby's room, like this room above us, that we spend a little extra time and effort on, well, maybe that's a room worth spending a little extra money on.
Exactly right. Take into consideration, you don't have to have every wall designed for the same level of performance. Take into consideration mechanical room separation from living spaces or bedrooms. Adjoining bedrooms, we might want to have a higher performing wall in between there for that level of comfort. Yeah. But if it's, say, a closet from a garage or a laundry room from a garage, we don't need to have a high level performing wall there relative to sound performance.
No big deal. Now, speaking of sound performance though, there's one other product from USG that we have not gotten into that I mentioned earlier in the video called Structo-Crete. And actually I have Kyle's colleague here, Brenton, who is actually one of the patent holders for this product. Let's go see if we can find Brenton. We'll talk Structo-Crete. Hey Brenton, you over here?
Back here.
Hey, there you are. What's up, buddy? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Beautiful job.
It's looking good, isn't it?
I love it.
I suspect if you work for USG that you might be happy coming in a house in this stage of construction.
I loved seeing the bones and how these homes are built. And I love it when someone's taken the extra step of doing what you're doing here.
Speaking of extra steps, we got something that might be the first residential wall ever to be done in this, right?
Not quite the first, but it doesn't happen every day like we do see the 3/4 inch product on the roof and on the subfloor. But yes, we are starting to see it more in the residential construction because there's really important aspects.
So Structo-Crete, I said that this is a new product. It's actually not a new product. You actually have your name on the patent And this has been around for 2 decades, is that right?
It's actually been around longer.
Okay.
So we had a super secret squirrel government project.
Ooh.
We call this the Army panel.
Oh,
it was
very
basically
cool.
to protect soldiers, blast and ballistic over the wars.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Not real commercially viable, so we kind of took the formulation and the idea and put it in the safe after it served its initial purpose.
Yeah.
We retained some of the brightest and best chemists, structural engineers, mechanical, property engineers, and they had some aha moments and came up with some new formulations that made it more commercially viable, being able to make it lighter, making a 3/4 inch panel.
So I've heard you say before that this is kind of like a fireproof plywood, right? Like this is, if you think about a 3/4 plywood we use in the job, we use it for subfloor, we use it for all kinds of structural reasons. This is kind of like a fireproof version of that, is that right?
Non-combustible.
Non-combustible, okay.
Non-combustible is
Non-combustible.
the key term. Yeah.
Gotcha.
There's an ASTM test for non-combustibility. It's ASTM E136, but it manipulates like plywood. You use the same tools to cut it, as far as a carbide bit framing blade. What I tell people is whatever you're going to prep a door with, same stuff you use. Milwaukee dozers or circular saws, that type of thing.
But it's actually a structural panel, unlike, let's say, a tile backer product, right? Like we could actually use this as subfloor over joists and walk on it. And if I remember correctly from the data sheet, it's something like 400 some pounds per square foot of force on this. So this is a true structural panel.
It is a true structural panel. The idea of it is back when USG invented sheetrock. Typically, if this house was built in the 1920s, it would be the artisan style of finishing the wall with plasters and stucco. Well, USG invented sheetrock, and that's a dry process. Structo-Crete is a dry process to take the place of a metal deck and pouring concrete.
Gotcha.
And then from that evolution, and when we were making it with the glass mat facer, now we're making the 1/2 inch for wall applications and so forth for high STC, load-bearing firewalls.
Yeah, if you look at your data sheet, one cool thing, I flipped through I don't know how many pages it was, like 100 pages on this product. There's a million assemblies in the commercial world for 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour ratings, and also some really high STC ratings, because if you're building a commercial building and I'm in this apartment and there's someone above me, I don't want to hear them, whether they're walking across the floor, whether they're arguing, all those things come into effect. And I suspect when you're a commercial builder, it's a product like this that really makes your job a lot easier.
It does. This product really excels when it comes to fire, structure, and acoustics. Because of the non-combustibility, the incredible strength of the panel, the stiffness of the panel, and then the mass, the density of the panel.
The acoustics. Let's talk on the acoustics, because
Okay.
that's how I use it here. We're in the primary bed, the master bed. The person who pays the bills is in this room, and they do not want to hear what's happening in the other room.
Right.
So this room, or this wall, I should say, separates us. The stairwell's right on the other side. On the other side of that is the kitchen. That's where all the noise in the house is happening. We didn't want that noise coming in here. Right. So first off, I framed this wall with staggered studs. So 2x6 base plate, 2x4s on either side. So when this panel gets attached, it's only attached to the 2x4s on this side of the base plate. On the other side of this wall, I just have standard 5/8 sheetrock panels. I've got full insulation in this cavity. Now on this wall though, I just did a single layer of this 1/2 inch product. And then I'm gonna finish this with a level 5. So basically we'll fully coat this wall. No one will know what product's behind there because it's gonna look like the rest of the house.
They'll notice when you pound on it, it's going to feel a little bit more dense. That's what you're really going to appreciate.
Great point. And it's also going to get me a pretty high STC rating for this wall as well, won't it?
It certainly will, especially when I see some acoustic caulk that you may be doing in different areas. I think you talked about putty pockets.
Yep. Yeah, so for instance, on these outlets, these all have putty pads behind them. And then we have an acoustic caulk. Yeah, we just installed these panels yesterday, but we're going to use acoustic caulk between the cuts and the Structo-Crete and the box themselves. And then I'm seeing you look it up and down around the entire perimeter. This will get a caulk joint as well. Now this wall's a little bit wonky here. I've got a hidden door going in. Stay tuned for that. But this will get clad with probably some wood cladding. A hidden door here. This is a spot for a future homeowner to put a safe, to put their luggage, whatever. I also clad that wall which separates the kitchen with Structo-Crete as well. And this entire wall was filled with insulation as well.
Oh, yeah. You're going to get very, very good sound performance out of this. The attenuation of that sound, that airborne sound, speech, that type of thing is going to be fantastic.
For sure. Now, Brendan, one other wall in the house has Structo-Crete on it. Unfortunately, you can't see it. I covered it for you. I'm sorry about that. I know that makes you cry a little bit. But the wall upstairs, which is, I'm calling it the baby's room. I don't have a homeowner here yet, but let's say if a baby does sleep in there, that room has staggered stud construction. It's backing to a stairwell, just the same stairwell this one's backing to. We used a layer of Structo-Crete horizontally because that was the easiest way to install it on a 9-foot ceiling. This is a 9-foot ceiling in this house, and these are 4x8 panels. By the way, these are darned heavy. I think these are 120-ish pounds each. Did I say that right? Yep. The 3/4 are more like 150 or so. 170 pounds. So this is a heavy, there's a lot of mass going on here. And mass is good when it comes to sound abatement. So on that wall, this first, we acoustic caulked everything, and then I put another layer of 5/8 on top of that. And honestly, I want to test this house later once we get some doors in place and see what the STCs look like in real life with my little cheap sound meter. I think if we play some rock music, the kind that doesn't get me a strike on YouTube, and we see that these walls, I suspect, are going to make these rooms really darn quiet.
They definitely should and then will, because what you want to do is you want to add those different layers with those different masses, think of it as a filter. So that energy, that sound, airborne energy going through, you want those different mass layers to break up that sound, to stop those particles from moving.
Yeah, I like that. And tell me if this is true. Is it true that mass, like Structo-Crete in particular, that's so heavy, helps us with those low frequencies like bass?
That's correct.
Is that true?
That's correct.
So a lighter weight wall that would transfer, it would basically vibrate that material easier than a really heavyweight, massive product like this, right?
Correct. It takes out the lows.
Yeah.
And when you combine it with different materials and you can filter those out and change that frequency going through there.
All right, now I'm curious, from your perspective, you go to job sites all over the world probably, and it sounds like you designed this for a whole different purpose than what I'm using it for today. What else do you see in the residential world? You know, this is my colleagues watching us. Where else could you see this being used on residential projects?
On residential projects, you can use this on virtually any surface in the house. The floor, the walls, the roof. We even make an extra strength Structo-Crete panel where you can build your foundation below grade.
Wow, how about that?
Panelize, frame your foundation out of that. We're also seeing it being possibly used as an architectural board as well. Somewhat similar to what you're doing here is that you're doing a full skim coat. This isn't providing any structural value for you. You're doing it for an architectural product and for the STC decibel reduction.
You know, my business partner Tim and I were talking about this product in particular, and we've, on several houses over the years, we've poured lightweight gyp or lightweight concrete on second floors so that, let's say if you've got a kid's bedroom above here, you don't want to hear them knocking around on the floor. I could probably use a 3/4 version of this upstairs for that same purpose, couldn't I?
You absolutely would. So that knocking around, that's the IIC, the impact. And because this is a panel product versus when you're doing a continuous pour from wall plate to wall plate, actually, because it is a panel, that knocking sound, that energy actually can dissipate these cracks.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh,
and the best way to mitigate IIC is actually dampening, the cushioning of it. So putting down a sound mat or using a carpet.
Before you put this down?
On top of this.
Or on top of that, okay, gotcha.
So that is the dampening at the point of impact.
Yeah. You know, another thing I hear talked about a lot out there on the job is fire codes and WUI. You know, in particular here in Austin, Texas, I'm not even in I'm in a neighborhood, and yet my inspector specifically said, hey, these eaves on the house with this 2-foot overhang, I need to make sure that you don't have any ventilation into that soffit area. And I don't build, you know, in California or in these wildfire areas, but I suspect builders that might find some specific uses for a product like this that's both structural and combustion resistant. Did I say that correctly?
Non-combustible.
Non-combustible.
So non-combustible is important in an environment. We can take Lahaina as an example.
Yeah, there you go. Terrible.
Devastating.
Devastating.
And what was happening is a house would catch on fire or a business, and it was creating fuel for the next one to catch on fire. When you have non-combustibility, you're stopping the fuel source. A non-combustible house still may become damaged, but you're not adding more fuel. And so if they had more non-combustible structures, it would be a much different story today.
That's pretty sad, man. Everything that happened there. I actually have a Build Show fan in Lahaina who's been talking to me about his rebuild on email. It's been fun to see him. He's one of the first ones to start rebuilding in Lahaina. But I think your panels could absolutely be used in a zone like that in reconstruction.
And also, if this panel gets wet, it doesn't care. Once it dries out, all the strength regains. You can take this panel, throw it in warm water for 56 days, dry it out, it'll still have the same strength.
How about that? That's pretty cool. So even in flood zones, let's say,
Correct.
You dry it out and you're fine.
Correct.
That's pretty cool. Brendan, it's not every day I get to talk to a guy who has a patent on using the product out there. Plus, very cool to hear the backstory of how this kind of originated at USG in the decades previous. So very fun to have you on the job site, man.
Thank you very much for having me.
We got a lot to do still here on the job, Brendan. We should get out of the way because it's about to get muddy around here, and we are about to look a lot whiter than I already am in my black jacket. We'll see you a little bit later. All right, my friends, we are in the final stages, and look at the ram board. You can tell by all the mud that's on the floor that the guys have been busy. Now, we ram boarded the house, and then we ended up coming back and papering it. I think we really captured most of the junk. So when we pull this, our Advantech subfloor is going to look brand new again. One interesting thing about this particular phase of construction is that it's a little bit of a stop-start. We use the Vosker cams here, and it's really nice to be able to pull out my phone from the office, from another job site, and go, hey, did the Drywall guys from 3C make it out to the job site today? You know, you think of those as security cams, but frankly, that's a project management cam as well. So I'm a big fan of those, and you know, with that cellular connection, I'm not worried about, you know, did someone unplug the cord? The solar's always recharging it. That's a really fantastic tool, not just security, but also job site management. Now, as we finish up this job, we really only have another day or so here to finish, and then we're ready. But two things I want to mention. This is the level 4 finish on this job. We didn't go to a level 5. A level 5 finish, we would have skimmed the entire wall. But this level 4, we've gone from the tape coat, which is you know, a level 1 basically, level 2, the block coat, and then the skim coat that kind of spreads that out, and that's where we stop, is this level 4. So we really just have sanding and priming to go on this job. Now stay tuned for our paint episode coming up, where we're going to give you some tips and tricks to really make sure that this level 4 looks fantastic, rather than having to go to that next step, level 5. Now, if this is a more modern house, if we had a lot of raking light, some big tall walls of glass, you may want to consider going to that level 5. That full skim coat does look fantastic, but remember, it's more labor, it's more work, it's extra days added to the schedule. For this house, level 4 was perfect. I think this is going to work out awesome, and we're really going to like this smooth finish. In a lot of parts of the country, you'll see texture, where at this point, the drywall contractor comes in with a texture gun and basically blows a texture into the house from a light to a heavy. You can go check out some of Drywall Shorty's videos to see what that looks like and the different options out there. But I really like level 4. This is a good compromise between a smooth finish, but maybe not quite as much money as that level 5. And also, because we've got that 5/8 sheetrock, this little thicker sheetrock, this level 4 really does look fantastic on the walls and the ceilings. Anyways, with that being said, big thanks to USG, our partner on this particular episode, and of course to our friends at Builders FirstSource who have sponsored the entire project. I appreciate you guys hanging in for a long episode. Hopefully you learned something. Stay tuned for our future episodes. After we get the doors and trim on, we'll come back and do a test on our soundproofing to see how well we did, because you know, we spend a little time and effort on the bedrooms in particular to make sure that those rooms are quiet. I'm gonna put a radio in, we'll take my sound meter, we'll actually test and see how we did once we actually have a door that we can put in place to block those rooms off. So that'll be fun. That being said, check out our past episodes and catch up. We've been building this house start to finish for you. Long episodes to really get into the nerdy details. So I'll see you next time on the Reisinger Build.